Welcome to Breaking Ice and Building Bridges from Possibilities. I'm Kelly Johnson.
And I'm Byron Jackson. Glad you're here.
Connecting a community through conversation.
Hello, and welcome to Breaking Ice, Building Bridges. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me, I have
Ava Doyle.
Thank you so much for being here, Ava. First of all, who are you? What's your thing?
Well, first off, thank you for having me here. I appreciate your organization and the ability to be able to tell my story and do it in a way that people can listen to what I have to say. So thank you very much for that. So I am an educator. I am someone who wants to serve people, and I'm somebody who is now in a place in her life where she would like to use that information of years and years of experience and life struggles to teach others and help others succeed in their lives. That's who I am and hope to strive to be.
Okay. Education. Tell us a little bit about what that background entails. And do you ever get tired of the kids?
Well, so my education really, it got started, I'd say, in fifth grade, where I had my fifth grade teacher who thought I would be a good teacher. And I looked at her and said, whatever, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about just because you're my teacher. I really did not start education really until about my mid-30s. I had always wanted to do journalism and anything to do with news ever since I was a kid. So I went to the University of Oklahoma and pursued a bachelor's degree in that. But what was unique about getting a bachelor's degree in that was it actually, one of my senior campaign projects was to help promote a national campaign on financial literacy education for middle school students. And that actually led me to a job to be a financial literacy educator. So that's actually where education started, was through that. I did that for 6 years and then just realized, hey, I really like this. And so I've had other stints where I've substitute taught. I've also taught retirement education to employees with the state of Oklahoma. So that's really kind of where that is. During that time when I was a financial literacy educator, I ended up earning a master's degree in adult and higher education administration from University of Oklahoma. And so after that, I've just realized I really liked it. So maybe my fifth grade teacher saw something in me, which usually they do. And to answer your question about the kids, I actually do like hanging out with the kids. Because I substitute teach right now, and I really do enjoy them. They actually have taught me things that I didn't realize that I could be taught. Here I am trying to help the teachers in their absence teach their lessons, but the students are actually teaching me information, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. But it sounds like you're not just limited to kids. You run the gamut as far as like whoever wants to learn something
Exactly.
gets to learn something.
Exactly.
But I imagine it changes your approach quite a bit. How do you tailor a lesson, especially something like financial literacy, like what you've been doing for so long, towards middle school students versus to adults and then even older into like retirement?
Absolutely. So when you're dealing with those three demographics, there are different ways of how you have to approach your education. Any student, obviously, you have to look at it from a pedagogical perspective and cooperative learning, where the teacher is allowing the students to learn on their own, but they're guiding them. When you're getting into adults, you're dealing with more of an andragogical philosophy, where you're more facilitating and you're having to teach adults in teaching using their own lifestyle and history to teach them. You don't really want to just say a bunch of stuff and then have them fall asleep. And even among college students who are in the beginning of their years in any kind of learning versus someone at the end of their years, you have to know the difference in how they learn and how they receive information. Usually people who are more older, they sometimes just want all the facts, just give it to me. This is what I know, and write it down and so forth, versus more of a younger adult demographic where you may have to do more collaborative, more visual, kinesthetic learning or teaching. So you really have to be very sensitive to all the different demographics to make sure that they're getting the information that they need to be able to succeed.
Yeah. I think that teaching is kind of a very like performance kind of role. It's not just having the information and then sharing it. You also have to present it and in a way perform it. And I'm friends with several comedians, and I think that this concept of bombing in doing like a stand-up set is similar to bombing as a musical performer, like I am. But then, yeah, I think that definitely happens in teaching as well. Can you tell me about a time that you've quote unquote bombed as a teacher, but then the lessons that you learned from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the elementary students that I've had to deal with, I've had to learn that there are different ways of how they have learned maybe math skills. And I've also learned with even some elementary students and middle school students that it's very important that what you're communicating is getting across. One of the things that a lot of people tend to forget is in communication is not necessarily what comes out of your mouth, it's how it's received. Yeah. That's where the two-way communication model works. Yeah. And so there have been many times that I've tried to give out information to not just elementary students. Those are elementary and middle school, which are just more recent, but this can be any demographic I've been with, where I've said something out loud and there's been more confusion in not saying the right words or saying the lesson or the instructions correct. So it's really important, and I can definitely see this in the role of a stand-up comedian because I love stand-up comedy a lot, that it's very important that communication is very key to make sure that whatever is coming out of your mouth, it needs to be perceived to the person receiving the communication, which is why rehearsals are so important. One of the things you'll notice with a lot of comedians, and I've heard this from some comedians that will just do, maybe they'll go to where they're going to perform and maybe they'll do an open mic night. So people don't know that they're there. But the purpose of it is for them to be able to take their material and throw it out there to see if this group of people who never expected them to be there, can they perform and get the information correct? And if it's not, they can go back to the drawing board. And that's something that I've had to do many times, especially dealing with younger students, that I can't teach to them as I would teach to a 9th through 12th grader. I have to bring it down. I have to remember there are certain things and there's certain things that they've not elevated to. I dealt with that with the 3rd grade group, where I realized that they did not understand how to take a test because their teacher had not trained them for the upcoming state tests. But I had to take on that. And so that's one of the things that I learned a lesson of, that I have to be very careful and I have to be very thorough, and I have to do things like put your name on top of the paper, or make sure you write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the side. And so those are some of the lessons that I've had to learn. And I've also been able to go back to those teachers and say, here's what I did. What do you think I should have done differently? So, yeah, so it's no different than stand-up comedians. Actually, it's very similar. Yeah. Very, very similar.
I once taught a class of like middle school age, maybe like 5th, 6th, and 7th grade kids in a pretty small classroom, but it was music based. And so there were drums and guitars and microphones and a bass. And that is when I learned that I am not the best teacher for kids. and you know, especially in a musical context, it takes a lot of a specific kind of person to control that kind of environment. And so it was a hard lesson for me to learn. But it also made me comfortable in the skills that I did have. I think maybe something about what you were saying is that rehearsal part, it is sort of difficult, especially nowadays, that there's not a lot of opportunities to maybe like practice as a teacher, at least with a live audience, right? That you can practice in front of your mirror all you want, but then once you get into the room itself, it's very different whenever you just have a kid staring back at you with a blank stare, like, I have no idea what you just said. How do you, I guess maybe you've probably developed that skill as far as like improvisation and then being like, okay, where did I go wrong here?
Absolutely. Adaptability is really important. Matter of fact, someone recently told me that's one of a really great quality about myself is being able to adapt. And the more I think about it, I think that she's right, because when you're filling in for as a guest teacher or a guest speaker and you're walking into a room that you don't know. So this happened many times teaching financial education and walking into a organization that had me there because their grant said, we need someone in financial literacy. Come talk to our 50 students on a Saturday morning who really don't want to be here.
Right.
And go. And so I've had that situation. And of course, in substitute teaching, where recently at one particular school, I had found out that this particular teacher had many substitutes. And so I couldn't figure out why the students were not behaving correctly until I was able to figure it out, and then was able to take a subject and use that adaptability to go, okay, you know what? We're not going to do what the teacher has said. Because I had actually talked to another teacher. Another teacher said, do this. And I said, we're going to learn about New York and immigration. And we did a whole lesson on that. And the students got quiet and engaged and into it, which was something I think their previous substitutes had never done. So adaptability is really, really important when you're dealing with young people, older people, just any people. Because if not, you're going to get those blank stares by thinking, okay, I'm going to say it like this because this is the way I see it. But again, going back to that communications model, it's not necessarily what comes out, it's how it's perceived. So you have to learn, especially as a teacher, or if the students are not getting it, and you just got to be able to go, okay, how can I put it in a different perspective? How can I say it a different way? You also have to, as my public relations, because I got a degree in journalism, but PR was the specialty. And the one thing that my PR writing teacher used to always write on the board and on the piece of papers that she turned in, she always kept on saying, know your audience. And that has been one of my key phrases that has helped me in education is you have to know your audience. The way I talk to third graders cannot be the same as I talk to 50, 60-year-old people who are about to retire from state service. It's not going to work. And even just recently, I filled in for a teacher who decided on the 67th day of school, she had them write an essay on 6-7, which was hilarious. And the kids were like, yeah, I don't like this. But being able to adapt to them about that and get them to write in complete sentences, and how do you do that sentence structure and so forth, and how do you communicate that, is knowing my audience and knowing, engaging, okay, what is it that how they can write and speak and do its speech it is a underlining way of professional development. They don't know that they were doing it. But how could I do that so I can understand, okay, this is how the students operate, so now I can pursue on. So it's really important to know how to constantly adapt, know that audience, and adapt to it in a way so that you can see those light bulbs and those eyes open up. And then they can say, oh my gosh, Miss Doyle, I totally get what you're getting at. Mm-hmm. So, and that's usually the best reward in the whole thing.
Yeah. Since you've been doing a lot of financial literacy, and we're in a time where people probably need that as much as ever, what's one thing that you find yourself repeating over and over again, no matter how many times you keep teaching these financial literacy things?
Are you asking so far as what the concepts are not getting through to them, or what is it? Can you elaborate a little bit
like
more?
As far as something that's really important that most people seem not to know, and that you are maybe astounded that you have to keep saying.
I think for a lot of people, and even in myself, it's the whole thing of well, budgeting is obviously something that a lot of people really struggle with. And I think also too is, and even I've struggled with this myself, so I'm not saying anything that I don't struggle with, but I think it's just seeing the future. And that's where the savings and seeing the financial mistakes that you're making, that's a big thing. It's very difficult to teach, especially to young people. And going back to that difference between teaching kids versus teaching adults. Teaching kids, you're giving them information, and they're just trusting you as the credible source. Adults, they've already gone through life and they're having to use their own experiences to learn. So when you're teaching money, it's very difficult to young people because they've never endured it. So they're going off of you as a source, but then they don't see it. When you're dealing with older, and so then when you say to that young person, you need to save, they're like, for what? Why? Mom and dad have got everything. But then when you're getting to someone who is a lot older, and especially what we saw in the retirement planning, even though a lot of people had, with the state, they had a pension, it still wasn't enough money. And they couldn't see that, like at 65 or 63 or 58, they could see the money then, but then they really couldn't see that you will probably live till 90. Yeah. You're going to have money then. What is that going to look like? And so that's the thing, is just the future. That's a big, big problem in money management. And even I struggle with that too. That's not anything that I can sit up and say, I've got it mastered. No, it's the future. How do you calculate, or how do you teach people, whether they've never experienced money or they don't understand that there's going to be roadblocks ahead, that you've got to think about the future until you pretty much die. So how do you teach that? And that's something that's a very hard concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's also that the systems are set up in a way that make it much more difficult to do these things in the wisest way or the easiest way. So what are some tricks that maybe you've picked up along the way, or maybe other people have shown you, that really works for planning for the future?
I think first off, storytelling helps a lot. It's very hard for people to relate if they don't hear people's stories. A lot of the major people in the financial literacy world. If you hear, like, for example, I'm just going to use his name because everybody kind of knows him, but Dave Ramsey. I think what's really great about listening to his show is not necessarily, even though he is giving advice, it's listening to the people calling in and hearing the situation and people relating to the situation. Now, granted, they're trying to get advice, but I think as people listen to other people, they feel like they can relate. So I think storytelling and hearing people's situations helps a lot in that, first off. I think also, too, allowing people to tell their own stories. So listening to other stories, but telling their own stories, and them trying to figure out with their own information, how do I get out of this situation? So I think that can play a role in it. And of course, just, the resources, but you have to make the resources where it's available. Once again, know your audience to someone. You can't start talking about high yield savings and, CDs and money markets and all this great stuff to people who are just trying to get to tomorrow. And that's a big disconnect. I know that recently the AP wrote an article on that. And while it was really great about saying how are these ways to save money, if someone put in the comments, great, now use that for somebody who is struggling. And I was like, perfect. That's exactly the problem, is that we have this thing where people are not relating to their audiences, and we don't have people who do that. So it's something that we've got to get better at. We've got to get more empathetic and be more sensitive and cognizant of people at where they're at.
Yeah. What have been maybe some success stories that you've seen that maybe you taught someone a while back, and then you maybe run into them later and they're like, hey, actually, this was really valuable to me, regardless of if it's financial literacy or otherwise.
Yeah, I was like, well, because financial education, the thing about that is it's a very behavioral thing. People usually don't come to you with their situation. So you could teach it, but they usually don't come back and say, thanks, Ms. Doyle. They usually don't. So I never experienced that. But I will say, when it comes to just regular, just teaching, I see it more when I've taught like middle school and elementary school. I think with those demographics, they usually will come back to me and they'll say, you're my favorite substitute, and we really missed you, and we really appreciated you. And I just thought, oh, well, the reason why they're not going to talk to me is because I was too strict. When in all actuality, especially when you're dealing with younger people, the structure is really important. So I'll get that feedback from young people or middle school people that were like, you were really great. Thanks for actually teaching us something. Our old teacher didn't teach this, or the other substitutes, all they did was just sit there and gave us a worksheet and did nothing. So that's usually where I got that. And as far as adults are concerned, one time I taught some communications classes to, it was out of Shawnee, Oklahoma, and it was they had done a Bridges Out of Poverty training, and I did the communication side. And I think the feedback with that in teaching these adults of why was it important that they, like a good example, people who in their theory or in their teaching, they have 3 levels of what they call wealth. And one of the ones that are more middle class, they state, are people who will introduce themselves. So if I introduce myself to you, my name is Ava, and you'll ask me, well, what school did you go to? And I'm not going to say I went to Broken Arrow High School. While that is a great school, nothing against Broken Arrow, because I ended up going to the University of Oklahoma, I'm going to introduce myself to that with that. a lot of the students that were sitting in the room didn't understand that. And that's because it's a very middle class way of thinking. When you are, as they say, low resource, you base yourself based on your name. So the name that you come from, I'm from the Doyles, or I'm from the Long family, which is my mother's side. I come from that. They say that's very common. Or if you are upper class, it's based on the family, but based on who has the wealth. So like in England, the Windsor family has the wealth. So that's what they'll base it on. And so I remember a lot of the students coming to me saying, thank you, because I didn't understand why people would ask me, well, what school did you go to? And I just didn't understand what that meant. And I had a lot of great feedback off of, teaching elevator speeches and why is that important and so forth. So that was something that I really enjoyed that and wish I could do more teaching that to people.
Speaking of, I guess, wanting to do more of a specific, is there maybe a lesson or a class that maybe you have a topic that you've wanted to talk about, but you haven't gotten the opportunity to do? What is that?
I want to focus on communications. I cannot stress to you, until I went to school, I did not understand that communication is something that hurts a lot of people. Whether it's conflict resolution, whether it is just simply listening, communicating to people, I really believe is something that can really help or hurt a relationship. And when I say communication, I'm not just talking about writing. I'm talking about looking at someone's body language or where they stand, and so forth. A good example is I have a cat, and I love my cat a lot. And I can tell, because I'm single, I can tell off of my cat and how he looks at any man I've brought over to my house. And I can watch him. And the way he communicates, whether he is nearby or he is far away or he's with me and not around that gentleman, can be a source of an indicator of what is going on and why does my cat pick something up off of this man that I'm not getting. And I think that that's something that we as people have a very hard time with, because we're so big on, well, I really want to get to know this person, or I'm taking this abuse because, I really want to get something out of it. And when I say abuse, I'm talking maybe a toxic environment or someone talking to you in a toxic way. So I wish that's something I want to do more of. I've been looking into books and graduate programs to get more information on that, because I really believe that helping people's interpersonal communications, whether it's in the job market, in relationships, and just social media, which that's a whole world that can, oh man, I'm waiting to read case studies on social media. Or even political communication, just how that can be very detrimental or helpful to people if they just knew how it operated. And I'd like to teach a lot of that.
Yeah. You're also in the right place, I suppose, in that Possibilities does do a lot of education and workshops regarding not necessarily just communication, but also the ways in which, we apply ourselves into communication, into connecting with other people. And so our Inside Out workshop is a big part of that, of how can we understand ourselves and be secure in ourselves in the way that we engage with ourselves, and then take that outwards and go, how do we apply and understand community in this way to people that are already around us, our friends, and then expanding that even farther out to people maybe we don't know, and how do we engage with them in such a way that makes them feel like, okay, we're a part of this community too. And so that is a very big and valuable thing that Possibilities cares a lot about. And so not just to you, but also to whoever is listening, that a lot of people are thinking about this too. And it is very important to us here at Possibilities, and it's important to you as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I really just enjoy the whole topic of communication. To be honest, I'll say I have a deceased aunt who helped me through my undergraduate years at the University of Oklahoma. And one of I think the best pieces of wisdom that she wanted me to look into, she said, I want you to look into an interpersonal communications class. If you have any electives, take it. And I was like, are you sure? She's like, just take it. Just do it. Best class I've ever taken in my entire life. I'm telling you. I mean, I've been, for my undergrad and graduate level, I've been to 3 institutions: a community college in Tulsa, the University of Oklahoma, and I studied abroad to South Korea for a semester. And I can guarantee you the best class I ever took was that 2000 level interpersonal communications class. And I remember like going, why is there not more of this? Because I really believe, and I'm not saying that sociology is not important. I'm not saying that behavioral economics is not important, or economics or psychology. Those are very, very important parts of the behavioral sciences. But communication, it really can make play a very big difference if you know how it works. And if you've got people who don't know, you can really hurt yourself, or you can really help yourself. And so I just really want to do more of that. I just not really sure how. I just got to figure out the how and what the resources are to get me to be engaged in that. And so I'm weaving my way into that as a business, or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I will try to figure that out.
Sure. Well, if only there was a way that maybe you could establish community around maybe using your voice and having it be accessible for people to hear you in a specific place at their leisure, so that maybe they could even listen to it whenever they want on like a podcast platform or something.
I'm not thinking of anything. Nothing's coming to mind. I can't think of it. Nothing's coming to mind at the moment.
So you're here. You attended our podcast workshop because you are interested in doing a podcast with us. Tell us about maybe what the idea is. This is subject to change. Maybe it can change direction. Maybe we'll go completely different. But as of where you are right now, tell us about what your podcast idea is.
So I actually have a couple, and you and I will talk about this later on that. So, but these are just a couple of ideas. The first one that I've wanted to focus on is something that's been on my heart for a really long time, and that is a podcast focused on people who nurture beyond biology. So basically, we all have mothers. And when I say that, whether it's usually a biological mother, whether we have a connection to her or not, we have that. The only thing is, a lot of times, mom may not fill in everything of the nurturing that we need if she's even there. And so one of the things I have noticed in my own life growing up, where there was a particular incident where my mother had been absent for a short period of time, and I don't want to speak ill of her because we do have a really great relationship now. But there was a point where she was absent. There needed to be people to fill in for that nurturing that I needed. Case in point, what I mentioned earlier, my aunt Angie, who played a role of that when my father went to his little sister and said, I don't know how to deal with Ava. She's got questions, and her mother is not reaching out, or her mother is not really there on the level she needs her. Can you fill in? And that's where my Aunt Angie came in and did that nurturing that I needed during my first during my undergraduate years at the University of Oklahoma. And so I had noticed throughout the years in dating single men who are single parents, talking to, I work a part-time job at a box warehouse store or hardware store, talking to people who nurture plants, to just reading stories of grandmothers filling in for kids, aunts and uncles, foster parents. I just keep reading these stories. And then I think the one story that really got to me was reading about Jennifer Aniston, the star of the hit show Friends, whom did an article, I believe in Vogue, who talked about how people would just hound her for not being a mother. And she said, why should I have to be that? I nurture other people's children and dogs and so forth. And just her career, she was more focused on that rather than, being a mother, which is really odd in Hollywood, given the fact that Hollywood's supposed to be, open and so forth. But they're like they're pushing like, when are you going to get married and having kids and all that traditionalism. So I want to focus the podcast on the nurturers we have in our world. Who are they? What are they doing? How are they filling in when, we expect mom to do it? And here's the thing. Sometimes mom can't do it all. Matter of fact, the society we have of mom doing it all is really recent. It's supposed to be, if you are a mother, you're supposed to have lots of people around. She's not supposed to be doing it all by herself. And so this concept of mom doing it all by herself is not correct. So I would like to focus a podcast on that. And being myself, I am also childless. And it's something that I've noticed in being a substitute teacher, in being a financial literacy educator, in having my friends' children and seeing them grow, that aunt role, and maybe even a mom role, like, you are tripping. I can't believe you are acting this way. I will call your mother. And talking about that. And so I just think that there's just kind of a missing a voice in that. Again, not saying that biological mothers are bad. Please hear me out on this, because I don't want any backlash of, and it's just, there's other people who nurture, and I believe that those are unsung heroes, and I'd like to focus on that.
Yeah.
So that's one idea. And then another idea is definitely like what you talked about, communication. I do have the background training in workforce development. And so I do want to somehow figure out, how do I work a business in that, in workforce development, and teaching people how to have better relations and communications. I know that with AI coming, everybody is kind of scared, and we don't know what this is going to entail. And so I would like to be able to help people in that world of, how do you be a better worker, or how do you communicate yourself through interviews, or how do you communicate yourself to working with other employers, or your managers, or managers listening to their employers, especially. And then, of course, the after effects. Let's say you're laid off or fired. How do you work through that, and so forth? So that's something else I'm kind of dabbling in. So those are my two ideas: is the workforce development, communication side, and then, of course, this nurturing podcast that talks about the unsung heroes of those who nurture us through life.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I'm looking forward to see how those take shape. Is there anything else that you want to promote or plug or whatever while we're about to sign off?
Yeah. So I guess I have some handles I guess I can mention.
Sure, yeah.
So if you want to find me, I am on Facebook at The Real Ava Doyle. And of course on Instagram, the same, The Real Ava Doyle. You can find me there. And if you want to email me, my email address is avadoyle consulting@outlook.com. So if that's something that you're interested in, like helping me and partnering with me or anything like that, I would appreciate it. So you can contact me at that email address. But yes, I do have those handles. And my hope is that with the Nurturing podcast, I do have a name for it, but I'm wanting to get some things more figured out before I do that. But once I have that, then I'll send out the handle and so forth. So
Cool. Ava, thank you so much for doing this with us.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Connecting a community through conversation.
Breaking Ice, Building Bridges is the Possibilities community podcast platform. Thanks for tuning in.